Welcome to version 2 of the Rocket Workbench. It hasn't been out very long, so it's a bit early for version 2. What makes it a version 2 is the fact that this is not a backwards compatible change. There are some changes to the model which won't allow you to use the previous version of the Workbench. Now, it will convert your existing models automatically, but you won't be able to go backwards. So if that is important to you, make sure you keep a backup. Okay, so what is it that changed that caused this? Well, if we look at our nose cone, for example, we used to specify the radius, the base of the nose. We now specify the diameter. Now, the reason for this is pretty simple, and that is most parts specify dimensions using diameter. So, for example, if you're looking for a nose cone, you're looking for a nose cone that's going to fit a 4-inch body tube, not a one that's going to fit a 2-inch radius body tube. Okay, so because the external world works in diameter, we should work in diameter too. Internally, the conversion is pretty simple, but that is enough of a change that it does make the models incompatible. Okay, so where is this change happening? Well, it's really only in two components. One is the nose cone, as we can see here. We have the diameter at the base of the nose, and we have the diameter of the shoulder. And similarly, if we look at transitions, we have a number of diameters here. We have the forward diameter, the aft diameter, and the diameters of the fore and aft shoulders. Okay, so these all require diameters and not radii. So that's now implemented. The big change number 2 is the support for multiple units. Okay, so previously, a lot of the dialogues required you to enter data in millimeters. So if you were working with a 4-inch body tube, as an example, you would have to do that conversion either in your head or through use of a calculator, but certainly external to the workbench, and that defeats the purpose of having one. So we can specify multi-unit diameters in a number of ways. So for example, taking the example of a 4-inch body tube, okay, so we want our forward diameter in this case, instead of 20 millimeters, to be 4 inches. So I type 4 and then the units, which is inches. Okay, so a bit of an unrealistic shape, but that's fine. So let's save that. Now, let's close out some of these other things so we can get a little more viewable area. One of the other ways we can change things is in our preferred unit. So right now, even though we entered a 4-inch body tube, it's displaying it here as millimeters. So we set the 4 diameter, and that's 101.6 millimeters. Okay. If we bring it back up, it'll show it in millimeters. If we change our default preferences, so edit preferences, and under general, we select units, and I'm going to go to imperial decimal. Okay, so instead of yards and feet, it'll be decimal inches. Okay, now you can see that my 4 diameter is in fact 4 inches. If I bring it up in the dialog, it's also 4 inches here. Now I can do the reverse too. If I want that to be 30 millimeters, it's 30 millimeters. Okay, when I hit enter on that, it's going to do the conversion for me. Okay, so this is pretty standard in FreeCAD. It's certainly not unique to this application, but it's something that we hadn't supported previously. Okay, so that's exciting. So now with our units reset to my preferred default, which is the metric standard, let's look at the main feature that was added in this one, and that's the component database. So you'll see in most of the task dialogues, you have this extra component diameter down below. And one of the key things in here is this button, lookup. Okay, so right now we're editing a transition. We select lookup. We get presented a table of standard parts. Now this table of parts comes from the Open Rocket project, so by all means show them some love. But you can see we have our basic parameters for transitions. So the manufacturer, part number, description, all the dimensions, and so on. Okay. We can do a search in here. So for example, if we want an Estes transition, there apparently aren't a lot in the database, but there are some. So we can select our Estes transition. And it copies all the parts over for us. Again, these units are all multi-unit compatible. We get our description put into the parameter section below. Now this does a copy of the part parameters. So for example, if we want to change this length to, let's say it's 32 millimeters, nothing is going to stop us from doing that, but it no longer matches that part. So be aware of that. Okay, so let's remove this. Now for some part types, and it's not for all, when we do a lookup, so for example, we now see that we have some body tubes in here, but there are other parts that are compatible with body tubes, such as tube couplers, engine blocks, launch lugs, etc. So we can select whatever is appropriate in here. Okay, so I'm going to just randomly select one. This is a blue tube part, and in this case, this is meant to be a coupler. So it's a little bit shorter than the full body tube. Okay, so the first thing you might be asking is, what about user-defined components? Well, that's not in here yet, and there are a number of reasons for that. So when we're importing from a database designed for OpenRocket, it has some very different properties from what we use internally in the Rocket Workbench. Now, some of them are useful, some of them are not, and some of the parameters that we use to generate our own parts are going to be very different from what OpenRocket does. So even though that sounds like a very simple thing to do, it is a little more involved. It will happen, but that's going to happen later on in the Workbench development when we have a more solidified data model for our own components. So that will be coming, but that's not in here yet. So for now, you can save your parts as you would normally and manage them through the file system. So that's version 2 of the Rocket Workbench. It's not a lot of change in terms of number of features, but I think you'll agree that the features are pretty significant. And I also think you'll be pleasantly surprised by all the features that are coming in version 3. There's a lot of development already underway for the next release. So in the meantime, have fun designing your rockets and have fun flying.